Hi, my name's David Holt, and this is the screencast for Advanced Legal Research Intellectual Property, the week dealing with trade secrets. Now, there's actually going to be two presentations for this screencast, as I have two topics that I'd like to go over. First is an introduction to trade secrets itself, and so some basics on trade secrets, somewhat related to trademarks, and that they're both rooted in unfair competition. They require two elements: that there's a property interest in the secret, and that there is a duty to respect the confidentiality of that secret. There is some relationship between patents and trade secrets in that clients may need to be advised whether they would elect to protect their intellectual property under a patent, which would be publicly disclosed, of course, or as a trade secret, where it would not be disclosed. There are pros and cons, of course, to protecting intellectual property under a patent. You have a limited duration under a patent. However, your remedies for infringement are quite a bit more extensive. For a trade secret, as long as the secret is kept secret, the trade secret can be maintained, and your remedies for a person violating the duty of confidentiality are grounded in contract and tort law. There are also some federal criminal penalties for trade secrets. One for trade secrets that are revealed to a foreign power, and the second for economic espionage. But largely, trade secret law remains a purview of the states, and that is continues to be true as the Uniform Trade Secrets Act was enacted, was published in 1972. The Uniform Trade Secrets Act was a document created by the National Conference of Commissioners on Uniform State Laws. Since 1972, its first iteration, this Uniform Act has been adopted by 45 states, and it largely follows the Restatement on Trade Secrets that was published in the 1930s. Okay, some of the major sources dealing with the substantive aspects of trade secret laws includes Milgram on Trade Secrets, which is a practice set that's available on Lexis. It's the most cited treatise on trade secret law. It goes over trade secrets as contract or operation of law, its relationship to patent law, and it covers extensively mathematical algorithms and computer programs. The corollary equivalent on Westlaw is Kalman on unfair competition. It includes materials on the Freedom of Information Act, the Uniform Trade Secrets Act, economic espionage, and a compilation of state statutes, essentially a 50-state survey dealing with antitrust and restrictive covenants. Now, this portion of our presentation this week is rather brief, and that is intentional because I want to dive into practice materials in form books, as these are the resources that you are likely to utilize when working with trade secrets. First, a very quick introduction as to the type of forms that you'll have available to you. They can really be broken up into four basic categories. The first are transactional forms, and so real property transactions, business transactions, family law, and estate planning. The second are procedural forms, and so pleading, summons, venue, parties, etc., motions in limine, enforcement and judgments, appellate motions, all of that good stuff. Model forms are going to be the ones that we're going to be diving into most extensively for this topic, and those include contract drafting tools, model interrogatories, model agreements, and so forth. That is followed by checklist. You may have seen some examples of checklist already. There's AMJUR Proof of Facts. Some of you submitted that as a secondary source for some assignments. That is a checklist. It will list elements of an action or the steps that are required in a particular legal proceeding. Form books are collated and published in various ways. Basically, there are general form books, which are West legal forms. is a very large set. There's something like 40 volumes to that set, and it intends to cover as many topics as possible. There are also form books by jurisdiction, and so Civil Procedure Before Trial, published by Rutter on Westlaw, is a good example of a form book that is oriented to a particular jurisdiction. We also have ones that are based on a particular subject area, and then we have ones that are keyed to particular code sections. West California Code Forms with Commentaries is an excellent example of that. If you hear the phrase code forms, that's what that means. It means that they are form books that are organized and keyed to particular areas of the code. Given that this is largely an area of state law, we're going to take a look at some California forms here. So West publishes code forms, which I already mentioned. There's a whole array of form books that are published by Westlaw. Bancroft Whitney is another publisher of form books with a particular focus on real property. I know this is intellectual property, but I want to go over this very briefly anyway, just because you may not have seen this during your first year with LARA. Miller and Starr is considered the Bible for California real property, and it includes a number of example forms. And another big publisher of forms that you may not be familiar with is called CEB. It's Continuing Education for the Bar. CEB publishes a whole library of form books, and some of them are very narrow compared with the offerings from Westlaw or Lexis. CEB is a nonprofit consortium owned by the University of California, and their materials are not licensed to any of the three big platforms, Lexis, Westlaw, or Bloomberg. They have their own electronic platform. Many law libraries, including large firms, continue to purchase these materials in print. Matthew Bender, available on Lexis, much in the same way as Westlaw has a large library of form books. And then finally, Rutter Group, which is the publisher of practice materials that is available on Westlaw, has a number of forms that are included with their practice sets. There are some forms that are published by the California Judicial Council. These typically are forms that are designed for pro se litigants that do not have legal representation. It's probably not going to be much of an issue for intellectual property practice, but I want you to be familiar that these exist. The California Judicial Council produces forms, some of which are mandatory, meaning that you have to use the form that's provided by the Judicial Council. A lot of the forms are going to deal with family law, domestic violence, adoption, dissolution, a lot of the topics where you have a large number of pro se litigants. Okay, national and federal forms and model documents. Okay, Wright and Miller, Federal Practice and Procedures, often considered the Bible for federal practice. It's a 31-volume set, and it includes a number of the official forms that have been adopted with the rules. It's owned by Westlaw and available electronically. West Federal Forms is an example of a general form book that I had mentioned earlier. It's a companion set to Wright and Miller. It's updated by pocket parts, and it has a subject index along with indices that are keyed to federal statutes or cases. The equivalent to Wright and Miller that's available on Lexis is called Moore's Federal Practice. Roughly similar. And here we're starting to get into some model documents. Bender's Forms are a group of interrogatories designed for the discovery process. It's a very, very large set. You'll be surprised how specific many of these model interrogatories can be. Proof of facts we already went over, but it does include forms for interrogatories as well as sample depositions. And causes of action includes checklist and litigation forms. Where we really get into the model documents and how they apply to trade secret law is with our contract drafting tools. And so our non-disclosure agreements, and there's going to be a number of sources that are going to be available on all of the platforms for this. West has a database that's called Sample Agreements. Now I should point out, in fact let's do that right now, that many of these sample agreements are derived from Edgar filings. And so you'll notice that when you type in sample agreements, Westlaw will suggest the discrete database for sample agreements, but there's also a separate database just on Edgar agreements. Edgar, for those of you that don't know, is the electronic filing system for the SEC. Many publicly owned corporations will submit their required filings to Edgar, along with exhibits, which may include some sample documents that could be useful for you. So if we do a search here for non-disclosure, you'll see that there are a number of Edgar exhibits that you can search by particular industry type, by the governing law, and locate a model document that is tailored for your purposes. Edgar is available on Westlaw, Lexis, and Bloomberg, and it's also available on the SEC's website. However, many of the powerful search tools are going to be available on those three platforms rather than the SEC. I'm going to spend very, very little time on Westlaw Practical Law, and the reason why is because it's so horribly expensive. You have access to it in law school. Unless you're working for a very large firm, you are unlikely to see this in the real world. I was told by a Westlaw rep that the cost, and this was 2 years ago, was $150,000 per year per attorney. So it's not a widely used tool. However, it's great. I'm using it for a lot of the readings that you may have noticed for this semester. It does include an automated drafting tool that's called Fast Draft. Likewise on Lexis, there's a number of B&A and CCH sets that deal with employment contracts. Amjur Legal Forms also has a number of business contracts, and again, you can search the exhibits that are attached to SEC filings. And this is a really interesting tool that's rather new, and it's Bloomberg Dealmaker, and I recommend that for a few reasons. For one, Bloomberg is cheap, and so you may actually have use of this in practice, and it's really pretty powerful too. So let's take a look at Dealmaker here. So here in Bloomberg, first let's take a look at some of the trade secret materials that are here. So if we go to Practice Centers and then Intellectual Property, they have a separate section just on trade secret law. And you'll notice that they have materials from B&A, and so a 50-state survey on trade secrets, restrictive covenants, intellectual property law and cyberspace, and then materials from PLI, the Practicing Law Institute. Trade Secrets: A Practitioner's Guide is a good substantive treatise on trade secret law. It's roughly equivalent to Milgram and Callan that are on Westlaw and Lexis. What I would like to show you here, however, is if you go to Corporate Transactions and then under Drafting, you can search for non-disclosure agreements and restrict that by industry. So let's say we wanted to look for employment non-disclosure agreements, and I wanted to look within those that are in how about the motion picture industry? Do a search. Oh, let's change industry here then. Let's do electronic and other electrical equipment components. And you'll see that we have a number of sample agreements here, and you can even restrict by governing law if you only want those that are in California. Now, the nice thing about Bloomberg here compared with Westlaw Lexis, you could do the same on Westlaw Lexis. They're pulling these from SEC exhibits, is that you can run your draft analyzer. And you can actually extract clauses from more than one document. And it'll show you differences from one clause to another, so you can see if something is essentially boilerplate. And another nice feature here is that you can look to see the firms that participated in drafting the document. If you click on all sources here, you can restrict by particular firm, by the type of the exhibit that it is, the year, industry, and so forth. Excellent way to locate some sample agreements and to really search into these services and find a document that you can tailor to your needs. In terms of the materials we've already covered so far this semester, I've been very pleased so far with the Yosemite and disparagement clause exercise and the novelty toothbrush problem for our patent law week. We are getting, as you undoubtedly know, close to the end of the semester, and so the two upcoming assignments that deal with licensing and trade secrets will not be due until the last day of class, which is the 19th. If you have any questions about any of the coursework or any of the materials that were covered in the screencast, please do not hesitate to email me. Thank you.